So it's October the 27th, 2009. We've met with the task force and have learned nothing. And we've agreed not to do anything until December the 1st. And we're now going to discuss the period between October 27th and March the 1st of 2010. After we left the meeting, I decided I wanted to look at the Bush and Green criminal files. And I did not want to alert the Oakland County people that I was going to check into that, so I had my secretary, Janie Chenard, call up to Flint and order the criminal files from 1976 to 1978 on Christopher Bush and Gregory Green. She was advised they could not find a file on Gregory Green and that the Bush files was in the archives and she would have to order them, and that I should call up in 3 or 4 days and come and pick them up. When I called in 3 or 4 days, the Flint clerk told me that she had received all of the files she had ordered from the archives except the Bush file. And therefore they could not deliver either the Green or Bush files to me. So that's another fruitless trip. I also got a call from Prosecutor Worthy in Wayne County asking me about my criminal law experience. And I told her that my next criminal case would be my first and that I had very limited knowledge of criminal law. And she referred me to an investigative subpoena law, which I was unfamiliar with, but I looked up, and it says essentially this: if you don't want to make a statement to the police, they can serve you with an investigative subpoena requiring you to come down and give testimony. And I can understand why people may be reluctant to talk to the cops. If you see me kill somebody, you probably would have some concern if you told the public or the cops that you might be my next victim. And so it makes sense to me. And that law provides that you can be required to come down to court, testify under oath, but the testimony you give is non-public, never to be distributed to anybody, except if necessary in the trial of a case. And it leads me to believe that's how Mr. Wasser was called in to testify before the Wayne County judge, and why I could not have access to the file. And I wrote Miss Worthy a letter and thanked her for the information. And I also got a letter from Prosecutor Cooper. It's a letter which says essentially this: I don't charge dead people, Christopher Bush, and therefore I'm not going to look into that part of the case. And by the way, if you talk about Mr. Wasser's polygraph examinations, you might be guilty of a crime yourself. Well, I didn't want to go to jail, much less lose my law license, and I wrote her a letter, response, said it's my understanding that Mr. Wasser never took the polygraph of Mr. Bush, and therefore that law didn't apply, because, as you recall, the testimony is going to show that he did not get sworn under the polygraph thing. It took place during some preliminary conversations. No reply. Also in November, I got 2 voicemail messages from Dave Llewellyn, a TV reporter for Channel 7 in Detroit, the ABC station, saying he would like to chat with me about the case. I called him back, I got his voicemail, and said that thanked him for his interest and said that we had agreed not to talk to anybody until December the 1st, and that was our understanding with the task force. I also called and arranged a meeting with Captain Love, spent a couple of hours with him. I thought it was well received. And I thought thought he made a good presentation, and I thought I did too. He took me back and showed me the material from the vents they got at the Bush house. Something the size of a golf ball or bigger, looking for one hair from a child or one fiber from a carpet, to my judgment from what I saw, would be an almost insurmountable job. I also talked with the lieutenant in charge of the laboratory, and she advised me, as I knew from reading the papers, that the Detroit crime lab had been closed down for improper results and reporting, and so now the Michigan State Police report was doing the work of that lab plus their own, and they were under tremendous pressure, and I can understand why next week's trial is more important than looking at this case. And I said to them, if you could have some of these technicians come in on the weekend, I'd be happy to pay their salary while they looked into this material. There was no acceptance on that. I sat down with Captain Love and talked to him frankly about my family's concerns in the case. He told me he would keep me advised, and said an interesting thing to me as I left. He said, "Barry, you have to understand that I have to deal with a bunch of middle-aged adolescents." Well, I assume to this day he was referring to his underlings. And I also understand to this day that not every police officer agrees with each other. And I called him once or twice. He had nothing further to report. And December the 1st comes, and we have nothing from Captain Love or anybody any different than what we were told on October 27. And I called Dave Llewellyn and tell him that I would be happy to chat with him. He and a production manager came to my house that day, and I said, this story, and you know how long it's taken me to get to this point, it's not going to fit into a 3-minute segment on your 6 o'clock news. I said I would be happy to attend an interview if you made the entire interview available to the public, and then you could select from it whatever excerpts you thought were appropriate for your broadcast. I was told they had never done that before, but I got a call back from the production manager that afternoon saying that they had taken it up and they would make the entire interview available on their system. And I know it was on, and I've heard rumors they only keep them on for 2 years, but if you do WXYZ.com, you can get all my interviews with the Channel 7 people since that date. And we made arrangements for Erica McAvoy, Christine's sister, and I to meet at Channel 7 on Wednesday, I think it was December the 3rd. And when we show up for the interview, I had a very pleasant surprise. I was introduced to Heather Catallo, an investigative reporter for Channel 7, and she gave me the Bush suicide report. The same report that Lisa Milton had been told was destroyed in accordance with our normal retention policies in January of 2008. It was surprising to me, but it was only the first time that a public record had been denied me and where the media helped me out. We're going to cover that at length later on in this presentation. Then in early January of 2010, we got a call from Detective Williams saying that the prosecutor would like to meet with Chris and I, and we went downtown in Wayne County, I think the first or second week of January, and they asked us not to go public with any additional information. I had no objection to that, provided there was a cutoff date. And when they started with infinity, I saw that we were at sort of an impasse. But with the assistance of one of the Wayne County Circuit judges, we agreed not to do anything for a couple of months. We weren't told why. We just agreed to do that. And it's my recollection that we didn't contact anybody for 3 or 4 or 5 months after that meeting. I Had a chance to meet with Prosecutor Worthy for a short time while I was down there. I will say this, I've dealt primarily with Assistant Prosecutor Moran, but every time I have called Prosecutor Worthy, she's either accepted my calls or returned them. As I told you, Prosecutor Cooper has not done any of that. Then on February the 17th, 2010, I had another pleasant surprise. Heather Catallo stopped by my house and gave me the Flint files on Bush and Green. The same files they couldn't locate in early November the previous year when I asked for them. She's a lot better looking than I am, but I hope that's not the reason that she does that. I think it was a deliberate attempt by law enforcement not to let the victims know anything. And I also am aware that law enforcement needs cooperation from the media from time to time, and there can be trade-offs. I'll give you this if you'll lay off that or something. But it confirmed, these files confirmed everything I had feared and heard from the investigators. And we're going to get into much of this later on, as I'll explain to you in a little while. But Bush was interrogated on January the 28th, 1977. His bail was reduced from $75,000 to $1,000. He was placed on probation. He was ultimately pled guilty to pedophile activities with a Kenneth Bowman and received probation. Gregory Green bail was never reduced. The files indicate he was never released from jail, although I've heard rumors to the contrary. I don't think they're factual. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Two guys do the same kid, co-defendants. One of them gets probation, one of them goes to jail for life. One of them is the son of a prominent automobile executive who has 3 other pedophile convictions. One is a poor kid from Flint struggling to get by. Checkbook justice? I hope not. Cover up? I hope not. But I have great fears, as you're going to find out later in this presentation, that that's a distinct possibility. Then I heard that the Oakland County prosecutor was calling a meeting on Friday, the 26th of February, to discuss the status of the investigation into the Oakland County child killings. I called Prosecutor Cooper's office 4 times that week, twice to voicemail, twice to an operator, to ask if I could attend the meeting. On the last call, I remember saying, please acknowledge that you got my calls, at least, even if you're not going to let me attend the meeting. And on Thursday, the day before the meeting, I got a call from Don Stutt, my friend, and then to be appointed the chief of police in Birmingham, saying that Prosecutor Cooper had asked him to call me and tell me I could not attend the meeting. Well, I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. Then on March the 1st, 2009, Chief Don Stutt calls me again and tells me that he had attended the meeting on Friday, that the Oakland County prosecutor, Assistant Prosecutor Walton, had presented more than one suspect, including the Bush and Gunnels participation, and that he had concluded there was not sufficient information on Bush and Gunnels to take any action. And Don told me quite frankly that based on what he heard, he would have arrived at the same conclusion. I asked him what information he was given, and he said, well, I can't talk to you about that, and I can understand that. I know there are rules on law enforcement officials going public with information. But I did tell Don that Prosecutor Cooper should never again use him as an errand boy. If she had something to convey to me, I wanted her to call me. I don't know what the result of that was. And then in December of 2010, later that year, when we received the Michigan State Police reports, there was a very interesting insert for March the 1st, 2009. The Wayne County prosecutor held a meeting in her office to discuss all the mistakes made at the Friday meeting. I think I'm owed an explanation of why two people have two different interpretations of what happened at that time. I have not had an opportunity to clarify that with anybody, but Prosecutor Worthy did not call that meeting without good cause, and I don't know what they talked about. I've heard rumors that I have not had conferred that when the Bush-Gunnels material was put up, the Gunnels picture was there with an X across it, and the statement being made that he was too young. And when we discuss who Mr. Gunnels is later in this presentation, you're going to find, in my judgment, he had a social relationship with Bush in addition to being a victim. So it's now March the 1st, 2010. We don't know anything. The only documents we've received are files presented to us by the media that are public records to which you and I and everybody else are entitled to see, except for that special rule that the King family gets nothing, even though the obligation of the prosecutor is to confer with the victims. So the King family is sitting at this position, having had encouraging reports from the investigators, the guy who have their feet on the floor and doing the work, and a shut-them-off procedure from the prosecutors. And this is where we leave chronology and get into subject matter. And you're going to find in that part of the talk that material was provided to us as late as this month that we had never seen before. So we're going to change from chronological discussion to subject matter discussion for the rest of this presentation.